You're watching The Source on CNN Philippines. I'm Pinky Webb. Our source today, Australian Ambassador to the Philippines, Stephen Robinson. Ambassador Robinson, welcome back to The Source. It's good to see you again.
Good morning, Pinky. Lovely to be with you once again. Thanks very much for having me.
You're very welcome, Ambassador. The last time I saw you in the news, a couple of weeks ago, if I'm not mistaken, was that you turned over about 100 oxygen concentrators, is what it's called, to the DOH. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's right. It's about 2 weeks tomorrow. I think I was out at the airport and Secretary Galvez was out there together with Secretary Duque and representatives from the Department of Health and the World Health Organization. And that was to deliver the second tranche of oxygen concentrators to the Philippines that we'd been asked to provide by Secretary Duque. And it was terrific to be able to do that because these oxygen concentrators are in really short supply, and to be able to access those for the Philippines was a tremendous thing. So I was delighted to be able to do that.
And let me add that when you said this is the second batch, because there was a first batch, if I'm not mistaken, of 100 oxygen concentrators that were also delivered or given to the Philippine government.
That's correct, Pinky. So we were about at the end of August, we were out at the airport once again with another 100 oxygen concentrators. And these machines, and you can see them in the video there beside me, are really important because they provide that extra hit of oxygen for those who are really suffering badly with COVID, and they're really life-saving machines. And because of the demand that was out there from India and Indonesia, they've been very hard to access. So the fact that we were able to provide these to the Philippines for distribution right across the Philippines to regional areas was a tremendous thing.
Thank you for that, Ambassador. Is there a third batch coming?
So there may well be. We're just exploring that now with the Philippine government. But when I was out at the airport, perhaps the important thing that I also did was announce that the Australian Prime Minister had increased Australia's commitment to the Philippines in terms of COVID support up to 1.8 billion pesos, 1.8 billion pesos over this calendar year and out to 2023. So that's a very significant commitment by Australia to the Philippines. And so I'm really pleased to announce that. And it comes in three ways, Pinky, which I think are really important. In the procurement of vaccines for the Philippines, so accessing vaccines for the Philippines, but in terms of, secondly, logistical support, and thirdly, advice to your drug administration about the disease from our Therapeutic Goods Administration in Australia. Back in February, might be worthwhile to note, I had a meeting with Secretary Duque, Secretary Galvez and Secretary Dizon, and we were talking about how does Australia help the Philippines. And what they said to us was, look, in terms of vaccines, we're probably going to get sufficient vaccines over time. But what we need from Australia is really Australia's knowledge and experience in dealing with a vast continent and ensuring that vaccines are distributed equitably across the country. Now, the same problems that you'll have in Australia, so Secretary Galvez said, we'll have here in the Philippines. And so could you provide us with advice and support to get the vaccines across the archipelago? So that's what we've been doing, and that's a significant part of this assistance, and it's really important for the Philippines.
Let me just repeat that, Ambassador. So it's a total of 1.8 billion pesos from this year, is that correct, until 2023?
That's right. So it's over a 3-year period, and it began already at the beginning of this year as we were providing support to the Philippines. And that's an increase on 433 million pesos from the previous commitments that we've made. So it's a significant increase for the Philippines. And it comes over these 3 years so that we can continue to support the Philippines on its road and its path to recovery. because it's not just about vaccines now, it's about longer term efforts to ensure that there are boosters, to ensure that everyone right across the Philippines gets the support that they need, to ensure that the Food and Drug Administration has the most accurate knowledge and experience to be able to deal with the pandemic over the coming years, because this is going to be with us for a long period of time, and we have to learn to live and work with it. Australia's experience should be highly relevant to the Philippines in that regard.
And truly, Australia has been a strong partner of the Philippines, especially when it comes to the COVID response. So there is vaccine donations. I think is that via the UNICEF, the vaccine donations from Australia?
So that is correct. So we're involved in a couple of things. We're involved in the COVAX facility, which has seen nearly 8 million vaccines already come into the Philippines. But we're working precisely with UNICEF to help get vaccines into the country over the latter part of this year and into next year, but also in terms of that logistical support as well, right. Buying cold storage facilities and making sure that they get out to the regional areas.
Yeah, it comes in vaccines, donations, logistical support, and of course, expert advice on the medical field. But in terms of vaccines, Ambassador, would you have a number on how much Australia has actually donated to the Philippines, whether it be through COVAX or you said UNICEF towards the end of this year or this last quarter?
I've got a financial allocation for vaccine procurement. I can't give you a precise number depending upon where the negotiations come through UNICEF and others, but it's 556 million pesos for vaccine procurement, 1.2 billion pesos for logistical support, and 17.4 million pesos in terms of health advice. So it's all pretty significant. That comes on top too, Pinky, I should say, of what we've already done with the Red Cross. And you'll remember, I think we talked previously about the fact that we've set up 2 testing stations, one here at the Port of Manila and another down in Mindanao with the Red Cross. We've provided a negative pressure ambulance to the Red Cross, and we've also given about 4 million Australian dollars worth of support to the Armed Forces of the Philippines in terms of assisting the Vic Luna Hospital here in Manila, but also the medical commands across the country, as the AFP has been doing it tough with COVID.
And very timely, of course, there is also assistance and help from the Australian government when it comes to disaster reduction and even climate risk management. Very timely.
Yes, indeed, Pinky. So there's lots of work being done, because during this year with our development assistance program, as you know, we commit about $80 million each year in terms of development assistance. And what we've sought to do is to parallel that and make sure that that's aligned with government objectives that go to beating COVID, but also dealing with disaster resilience. And just last week, I was actually up in Cagayan province in the northeast, looking at the impact of a program that we'd run with the FAO, the Food and Agriculture Organization, and the World Food Programme, to look at how Australia's donations had helped people in rural areas recover from typhoons and prepare for future natural disasters. And I went out and visited a couple of people who had been recipients of that money. It was just extraordinary to see the impact that these types of assistance can have on the lives of ordinary Filipinos. And it's just been brilliant to experience that firsthand and to get out on a farm, stand there with carabaos and help the farmer do a bit of work in the yard. It's just been marvellous to see the impact that Australia can have.
And again, of course, just on a last note, talking about Australia, it finally opened its borders after 18 months. These were very moving videos and even photos I've seen. But this is only for Australian citizens, if I'm not mistaken, permanent residents and their families. Well, I guess what I wanted to find out from you, are you seeing the opening of the borders to the rest of the world pretty soon?
So yes, I'm very, very positive, Pinky, that we're going to open up in the near future. You know, Australia needs foreign visitors, needs tourists, needs university students, wants people to come down to visit Australia. And as we're all getting to a point where we're managing COVID and we've got it under some semblance of control now, it's time to open our borders and to get back to having foreign visitors, you know, both into Australia, but also from Australia up to the Philippines. And we're looking forward to both of those things occurring in the not too distant future, because tourism and having those people to people links between us is ever so important and so valuable. So I'm looking really optimistic about 2022, both for Australia, but also for the Philippines.
Australian Ambassador to the Philippines, Stephen Robinson. Always good to see you, Ambassador. Thank you for your time.
A pleasure, Pinky. Always great to be with you. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And thank you for joining us here on The Source. I'm Pinky Webb. You're watching CNN Philippines.